only other segment today is Tim Bartel, and he's the CI. You're the CI. Welcome, Tim, to the show.
Thank you.
Yep, he's the CIO CFO at Lakeshore Veins, which is a very successful mid-sized family-owned business. But previous to that, if you don't know Tim, and I've known him for a number of years, first of all, he is a board of our advisor, advisory board member of the Technology Executives Club. So thank you, and that's what these mentoring sessions are about, to have these folks help everybody. And but before that, he was global director of business process optimization at Joy Global, and IT director of global applications for Komatsu. Anybody who makes tractors is cool to me. I just, so they're a pretty cool company, and a partner at a very successful firm called Clarkston Consulting. And you learned your trade at Dow Chemical and Syscon, right? Your core trade. So, as you find with many of these interviews and discussions, in fact, be sure and watch the whole interview, not this segment, but the whole interview with Tim Bartel. He shared some of the lessons learned along the way for his journey. And if you want to learn that, go to the site, go to the Board of Advisors and learn that journey. But what you'll find is that many of the folks that we have on the show have hard-earned lessons learned. And that's the whole point, is to share those with you and hopefully save you a little time and make things easier for you. So thank you. And then you and your wife started this Lakeshore Veins, and it turned out to be extremely successful, which is awesome.
Yeah, it was a good culmination of our careers, and it allowed us, obviously to be entrepreneurs, but also to apply a lot of the lessons learned that, we both had experience going through much bigger organizations.
Yeah. And you still help companies and stuff like that, on the side,
Yeah,
correct?
actually, there are some companies right around us and startups that I do consulting with
Yeah.
that, you know, well, it's kind of fun today when you start out. You don't have to worry about legacy systems, and
Yeah.
it's just the what
Yeah.
can I take advantage of in the cloud, and how quickly can I maneuver, and what's the best way to do things with today's technologies. But a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, I really does apply to big organizations
Big
and
organizations.
bigger
Yeah.
transformational changes.
All right. Well, let's get into it. And what we did, just so you know, because you haven't seen your slides yet, I took your questions and then I put the answer on the back because you gave me the answer also. So you tell me, should I just read that and then I'll go to that and then you can sort of talk about it? I think that might be a good flow.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. So the first question, you did it in a series of questions and answers. So the way you set up your talk today. So what is organizational change management? Why is it so critical to technology executives? So with that, I'll let you talk about that.
Sure. And definitely want to stress the organizational change management component.
Mhm.
This is not technical change management,
Mhm.
the process of how you actually change a production system. This is really talking about the process of how you successfully guide a business and organization through those transformations through to completion, so that you get those business benefits in the timeline and in the budget that was originally envisioned.
Mhm.
So, sponsorship, communication, aligning your organization, making sure you have the right organization, all the training and education, that are those are the components of change management that we'll talk about today.
Great. Great. So w- so let me, for my novice ears, right? So when you talk about change management, it's what the people are doing, but it's also the process itself, right? It's both, right?
Exactly, exactly. When you talk about change management, you've got the whole component of organization, process, technology all bundled together.
Hmm.
And why is this so important today? So many businesses today are driving digital transformations, which
Hmm.
means they're upending the way people work. They're upending the organization that they're in today. And obviously, underpinning all that is the technology that enables that. If you don't have good change management process in place, it's going to be extremely difficult to make those digital transformations be successful.
It would seem to me that that's exactly the point, that last statement, that if you don't have change management in place, and I don't care how big you are, you could have two people, three people, one of those startups, you can have 3,000 people, 30,000 people. You've got to help these people make the change. Otherwise, they'll keep using the same system they used before behind the scenes, I would imagine, or they'll just complain about it.
Oh, that's exactly it. If they don't understand the why,
Uh-huh.
and if you don't put the why in their terminology at a level they can understand,
Yeah.
they will resist. And you'll only take a lot longer and spend a lot more money than you would originally to get to that ultimate goal.
Interesting. Interesting. So your next question is, why does organizational change, or what does organizational change management encompass?
Sure. And for those who have some familiarity with organizational
Yeah.
change management, OCM, there's multiple different methodologies, there's multiple different frameworks that are out there, but they all essentially have these same four components I want to focus on today. And then as you got them listed on the slide, the first thing we'll talk about is sponsorship, which is really building that organizational executive level support. Um, the whole process of how you communicate and when you communicate, the process of making sure you've got the right skills, the organizational alignment, and then finally, of course, education and training, very obvious key components of leading an organization through change. Those are those components that no matter if you're using a methodology that we had at our last company called
Mhm.
ADCAR or other methodologies, these components are all there.
Good, good. I would imagine when you talk about sponsorship, you're talking about some of the leadership principles that we were referenced earlier, correct? Where it's communicating, and I assume you're going to get into some of that. All right, and then the next one that you say, oh, I assumed right.
The right segue into
Here, let me do
sponsorship.
it this way, Tim. Oh, when you talk about sponsorship, what is that? Why don't you go ahead and read it, and then we'll go in. What does that actually mean?
Sure. So sponsorship is the process of getting your organizational leaders all aligned on the same goal and embracing it so that they become your leadership, so that they are the ones going in the organization and talking about how important it is to embrace whatever technology change or whatever process
Hmm.
change is coming. Sponsorship gets that alignment all together. And obviously there's a whole lot I could talk about how you do it, but I really do want to focus today on just some of those lessons learned
Yeah.
that I have experienced through my career about building sponsorship, because as Kim talked about, it is one of those leadership qualities that really continues to build. As a technology
Yeah.
leader, you the first thing to do when building sponsorship you have to do is build the relationships.
Hmm.
Uh, you have to ensure that you understand what is driving the people at your level or possibly at the level above you. What are they trying to accomplish with the business, and what are some of their own pain points that seeking to understand before you go in the sales mode of why it's so important to you know use artificial intelligence or roll out new analytics or do an ERP system. You have to be able to understand what are their pain points, what are their strategies, and how is this going to help enable that. When you build sponsorship and
Hmm.
you can do it in that terminology, their terminology, our business terminology, you will then be able to much more successfully get the initiatives to move forward.
So you talked about, like, you referenced a prior speaker we had, Kim, that was on, Kim Bailey, and he talked about the first thing he does in leadership is to try and understand everybody what's important to them, that kind of thing. And you referenced that, but here I'll just read your three points here. Knowing what is driving the senior leaders around you. It sounds like that's what you were just talking about, but you also talk about something in your chart here called power maps. Who influences who? And so go
Exactly.
ahead and explain that, because I didn't hear that. Maybe I just missed it. Like, what were you
Um,
saying there?
sure. A power map is simply a tool that helps you figure out when you're working through a major change,
Uh-huh.
whether it's process or technology, there are going to be certain leaders within your organization that really control the decision making. So a power map simply take the organization chart and draw lines over who influences who.
Mm,
Very important because any as you work through any major change in organization, you're going to run into a lot of problems and issues. Um, the organizations are going to have ups and downs in their sales cycle. There's going to be acquisitions. Things are going to happen. Sometimes you have to deliver potentially bad news.
hmm.
You want to know who are the major influencers so that you know who to talk to first. And when you need a decision to be made, who are the right people to pull together? So a power map is an internal tool. I used to simply have in my desk drawer an org chart with some lines on it just to ensure I understood uh, when I needed to influence a change or to get additional budget money, who are the people to talk to initially so I can just make sure it was smooth as possible to get it through. An organizational chart a lot of time doesn't really describe where the power is in the company. The more you can understand that, just the better you can then navigate when issues and challenges come up.
That's interesting. Again, I referenced earlier in today's session sales training, and we had something called power-based selling, which did the same thing. I assume this is what you're talking about. You map out the org chart, and then you circle and like who's got more influence and things like that. Is that something you would literally do in this approach?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Exactly what I would do. And
yeah.
then once that is done, one of the important things to enable sponsorship through a major change is we always use steering committees. And I even think in today's world, having steering committees that meet regularly,
Mhm.
that get an update, that have an agenda, that have minutes, uh, making sure the influencers, those major people you circled on the org chart,
Mm,
were the sponsors of the steering committee as well as the people you made sure attended.
mm.
Then made sure the rest of the steering committee almost always attends, or even if they don't or can't attend, they will dial in, they will listen. So understanding those key influencers is a very important part of building sponsorship, which then should really also help your entire change process
Yeah,
move forward.
yeah. We had decision maker or decision makers, influencers, and also people that could block you but maybe not make a decision. And I think the big lesson I learned through that process, and tell me if this is similar, is almost anybody these days can block you if you don't treat them right.
That is absolutely true. You know, a lot of organizations today is matrix management, which
Yeah,
means there's a lot of consensus and collaboration that is done at the executive level. So even if somebody isn't that final decision maker, if they turn out to be a blocker, you still won't be able to move forward.
yeah, and it could be at any level because you don't
And it
know
could
who
be
knows
at any
who.
level.
You don't you so treat everybody fair, well, I think is the advice, correct? So just
Absolutely. And why it is so important to build those relationships,
yeah.
to understand the people that are around you, build a relationship so you can always talk in, if I'm talking to the VP of marketing or people within a
Mhm.
marketing organization, I'm always talking about, from a marketing or selling perspective.
Yeah.
On the supply chain side, now I'm talking about supply chain issues and costs of procurement and sourcing and those types of things. Um, because that will also help you to ensure that you can get around blockers when you have an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're going to be there. There's no way around it. Now, the last point you make on this chart is concise, regular communications in multiple formats. What do you mean by multiple formats? What are you saying there?
Sure. And it's also to be a great segue to the next
Uh-huh.
major part of change management is that multiple formats means at a senior level, you probably have to do something concise in the steering committee.
Oh, I see.
As you work down the organization, emails, blogs, a SharePoint site with regular updates, all different types of media are important to utilize because people receive information differently.
Yeah.
You can't rely on emails at the executive level to get almost anything across.
I
Or if you
yeah.
do, you better be very concise in your first three sentences. They won't read the rest.
Yeah. That's interesting. That is a good segue. The next one is communication. And what you're saying is really plan how you communicate to everybody and not just to, but I'm sure it goes both ways, right?
Absolutely. And it's a great follow on from sponsorship. Once you have been able to develop your sponsorship,
Uh-huh.
your plan, and put that in the works, now your next thing, and you should document this, is how am I going to communicate to all levels of the organization?
Yeah.
What's the method? How often will I do it? And who will do it? Those accountabilities are very key. If you don't do the accountabilities, a lot of times communications, push comes to shove, everybody's resource constrained, it'll fall through the gaps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. So use multiple formats, do it regularly, over communicate. I like that.
Yeah, I
I had,
can't stress this enough.
go ahead.
So many people think that, hey, I just created a summary email, or we just created a PowerPoint, we just had our steering committee meeting. Great, everybody understands. Not everybody was able to make that steering committee meeting. Nobody read the emails. Now you have a chance at, say there's a town hall meeting. You have a chance to speak. Bring it up again, just as an example. You cannot over communicate when you're working through a major transformational
Yeah,
change or even a minor one. When it's coming, what's coming next, who's impacted. Take advantage of every opportunity you have.
that's good. We had, when I first started this group, this is 20 something years ago. I used to do luncheons downtown, and we had a guy named Howard Tolman, who's a brilliant entrepreneur. I don't know if you ever heard of Howard, but he very successful entrepreneur. And he said the same thing, Tim. He said, be prepared to say the same thing over and over and over and over again with the same amount of enthusiasm and zeal that you had the first time you said it. And he said, because that could, the communication is such a big thing. It's such a
Oh,
big thing.
absolutely. It
Yeah.
almost probably, and even from a sales background, one of the things you'll learn about is the elevator speech.
Yeah.
Always be prepared. You never know when you're going to run into an executive or even a senior level person at a restaurant, going up and down an elevator, walking across a lobby, and you have an opportunity to speak with them for 20 or 30 seconds. Be prepared to be able to get a point across that's very important to you.
That's
And
great.
obviously the whole project,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
is being driven at the time.
Right. The next topic you talk about for change management is organizational alignment. And you say what it is, having the right skills in the right place to execute. Is that right?
Absolutely. Every time there's some type of a change, transformational change going on, skill sets that are required to run the business process or use the technology most likely will change to some extent. And it's really important the before you make anything go live to ensure that the skill sets are available to execute. A simple example: a couple of years ago, I was working with the vice president of finance to put in an AP automation tool. This tool would scan invoices, match the invoice vendor and amount to what was already in the system. And if things match, it would just put it in for payment. No one had to touch the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Scan, file, done. On paper, obviously, this is a great process.
Mm-hmm.
Saves a lot of time, much better controls. However, a lot of times the scanning process doesn't always read invoices correctly. Now you need a skill set within finance that can handle the ability to look at a tool,
Mm-hmm.
see what didn't work perfectly, make that correction, and then keep the process flowing. Totally different skill set than what you probably had already in that department. A simple example, um, more on the IT side, or another example, anytime you're rolling out new technology, do you have the skills in-house to support that technology once it's live?
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to do an assessment whenever there's a major change going on, whether it's process technology, to understand your own skill sets within the department, what those strengths are, what they can
Mm-hmm.
change, and what they can't handle. So you be ahead of the curve when those skills are needed.
Hmm. That's interesting. So know your own team's capabilities, strengths, and weaknesses. That was something that Kim also referred to, defining SLAs and cost benefit to determine and fill gaps. Good. So, and that ties into your organizational structure that you created earlier.
Exactly. And to set expectations across an organization,
Uh,
setting SLAs is a really good way to determine a staffing level for when there are issues, when there are problems, because it also set expectations. A lot of times, an assumption that once IT rolls out something new, IT has all the resources necessary to support it
mhm.
in a timely fashion. When there's an issue, the business wants it resolved and they want it resolved quickly.
Yeah.
Well, setting an SLA can at least make sure that conversation occurs as to what's a reasonable time frame for something to be reviewed, fixed, and so on. And
Yeah.
also then help you determine if you need extra resources, where's the budget going to come from and who's going to pay for it? Is the business benefit there or not?
Hmm. It's interesting. And the last one that you have, although I already got a question that's come in, if I can get to it here, is education and training, teaching, and you're saying teaching the why and the how, right?
Exactly. Certainly an important component of any major change
Mhm.
is the training of everybody involved as to what's going to change, when it's going to change, how will I do my job differently.
Mhm.
The education, we really focus on the why. So when we lay out an education plan, we will first try to have some sessions, whether it's an in-classroom session, whether it's a blog, whether it's just simply that's put out in a small video that purely explains in business terms why are we going through this process.
Mhm.
Doesn't get it involved in all the technology. Then follow on will be some of that more detailed training on the change that's going on, how we'll adapt to it. So that's why it's important to always look at the why and the how together. If people understand the why, they are much more accepting of the how.
That is such a huge insight. I can't tell you how many times I know that I've heard stories about people where they're trying to make changes and they're like, why are we even doing this? You know,
Exactly.
and and so when you talk about the why and the how, is this in a formal class setting, or is it using all of those communication tools that you talked about before, like here's a little of this and make sure you attend the class, or here's a little of this and here's a video. I guess it depends upon how big the scope of the project is or what the change is, right?
Exactly. You hit it on the head, Alex. It does really depend on scope, but it is also important to use multiple different media to do this,
Mhm.
um, and to do it as a continuous process almost from the start of any major change initiative is to start that education process. People have very limited attention spans, and certainly today when there's so much information coming at folks, it's pretty important to guide them through the entire
Mhm.
journey. The education is usually the first 50 to 70, 80% of the entire timeline of a
Mhm.
change is inserting educational pieces. The training, the how, whatever you've now changed will come near the end. But then it's also very important to understand that once you implement that change, you are not done with education or training.
Mhm.
Another one of the lessons learned, I don't think I documented it here, was it's very important to do follow-up measures and to plan in advance follow-up training. There isn't hardly any major transformational change that goes in perfectly and that people understand out of the gate.
Mhm.
So scheduling follow-up training 4 to 8 weeks to make sure that people are available. It'll relax them that, hey, if I didn't get it all the first time, I've got an opportunity
Oh,
for a follow-up session to learn, to
that's a
ask
good
my
one.
question after I
Yeah.
get smarter.
So I like that tip a lot. Schedule multiple sessions knowing they're going to think about their questions afterwards. Yeah, that's a good tip. You've done a lot. You've clearly done a lot of this. Well, listen, I think that's the end of your formal slides, but let me go back to here with your picture here because we got a question that's just come in, and I'm going to use the name Sally. Uh, Came from Sally. Question just came in from Sally, and she wants to know, in their organization, they have a governance committee when they make big changes, and how does and typically it's for the project for PPM when you decide when the organization decides what projects to do and that kind of thing. How does the governance committee or whatever your structure, PPM governance structure is, relate to change management? How does that tie together?
Oh, yes, excellent question, and there's a perfect tie. Uh, when most IT departments roll out a strategy, it's always a very good excuse me there. It's a very good idea to
Hmm.
have a governing body then help you through the implementation of that strategy, to prioritize projects and meet regularly as those projects unfold. Subsets of that committee, and I've formed them many times in my career,
Hmm.
then become the sponsors for specific projects.
Gotcha.
One of the important lessons learned I would talk about is that overall governance committee, the project management committee, or the
Yeah.
IT strategy committee, well, whatever take
Whatever you
name it,
call it. Yeah. Yeah.
those folks better be ask those folks then to be leaders of specific steering committees for those specific projects so that the integration and the tie and the sponsorship flows.
It really is a governance process.
It
You
really
know,
is.
yeah, yeah, where you have the key people that are approving the projects from all the different departments, et cetera. And then you have the change management component that should also tie into it in a similar way to how the development process or the working with the partner who's setting it up for you process, whatever the project is, however it's getting done. Well, that's,
Exactly.
yeah, go
When
ahead.
I was running global IT at Komatsu, I had multiple steering committees.
Yeah.
But certainly the most powerful, we had a steering committee that we reviewed on a quarterly basis the major initiatives going on in IT. And those folks a lot of times then became key people on specific for
Uh,
major specific projects like a CRM rollout. Some of those same people were these sponsors, and that alignment, kept both. It kept everybody informed.
mhm.
When I gave an overall project update on multiple projects, then those people typically would talk about the projects they were sponsoring. I didn't have to do it, and also then made those projects much more successful over time
Yeah,
because that alignment was there.
yeah, that's great. Well, those are your insights that you gave us, and I have to say it was awesome. In fact, I'll just do a real quick summary here for everybody. This is pretty easy. I like the way this flowed. What is organizational change and why so critical to technology executives? You answered that. What does organizational change management encompass? Sponsorship? How does that work? Communication plans? How to create communication plans? How to make sure that your change management plan is aligned with the organization. And finally, don't forget about education and training, which is teaching the why and the how. So, I think that about wraps it up. Great job, Tim.
Yeah,
This
perfect
is just,
summary, Alex. I couldn't have
yeah.
done it better myself.
Well, yeah. Well, you couldn't because it was really your summary. I just read it. But great job. I mean, I have to say, I feel like I just went through two awesome LinkedIn training learning sessions. That's the great. These were both awesome.